Welcome, everybody, to another special episode of Distant Intimacy. I'm one of your hosts, Curtis Shoemaker.
And I am the other host, Craig Kikowski.
And we are thrilled to be joined today by an author, storyteller, producer, TV writer, and thank goodness, fighting through all of this crap herself, Miss Sheri Holman. Sheri, yay! Welcome to Distant Intimacy. How are you doing?
Hey, guys.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you're feeling better. And as you know, we've been talking to people about William and Mary and then what they're doing after and things going forward. So my first recollection of you is fall of my freshman year. And if I may say, I have some art here. I believe that's you right there in the upper corner.
Oh, my God. That's it.
That would be Savage Love.
Savage Love. Yes.
Savage Love.
We sat on boxes and emoted. It was great.
It was, I mean, it was like, if I remember, because we hardly ever, even though we're in the same cast, we never saw you because it was two shows in one night.
Right, exactly. Ours was like some sort of like Sam Shepard modernist Spoon River anthology sort of thing. I'm not quite sure what it was.
I don't know if we ever got a chance to see it because we were either getting ready or just, I don't know if we ever actually saw the way through.
You guys were amazing. It was wonderful. We were the warm up. We were the amuse-bouche before you guys came on. It was great.
I left the amazing part to Brian and Carla in that one, believe me. But then I remember, did you, and I have a vague memory, and I don't know if it's true, but when we did As You Like It later that year, I have this memory of you and Nancy Gunn with in forest outfits with music. Okay, so I didn't dream that. Okay.
We're just like piping away. Exactly. We sang a little ditty and that was it.
Okay. I remember seeing, I have the Robin Hood outfits in my head and Nancy's wearing the running around.
I feel like we had shoes that pointed out. I can't even remember, but yeah.
Oh, she's froze.
That's my recollection of
technical difficulty. Sheri, there you go.
I know. It seems the internet connection's a little bit. Okay, good. Hopefully it'll be better.
Okay.
I think everybody in New York City is using Zoom right now.
It is the Zoom afternoon time.
Is it
working? We can hear you, and we have a lovely picture of your face. So
it's a great frozen image.
It is a beautiful frozen image. So, but then your love affair with the Russians began, I believe, in Three Sisters. Then, what do you remember about that great production?
Oh my God, I loved Three Sisters. I played Natasha, who was sort of the, I had wanted to play one of the actual Three Sisters, but I think Les Muchmore, who was the director, knew my personality a lot better than I knew it. And so he put me in as kind of this scheming, social climbing character, Natasha, who sort of barges in and makes everybody uncomfortable and miserable and then runs off with somebody who's wealthier. So it was great fun. And I got to work with Nadia Gorshkova, who played Masha, who was just an extraordinary actress out of Leningrad. Mm-hmm. And she was there. She had married an American who was in law school. And so she was in that production with us. And Nadia and I became very good friends and then sort of came to New York together and had quite a lot of adventures.
I remember when she descended onto the theater program and every guy was going,
wow. Exactly.
So
I love that production of Three Sisters. It was intense.
Was it so the Three Sisters were Tracy, Nadia, and who then? Who's the third sister?
Emily.
Oh, Emily, that's right.
Yeah. What is Emily's last name? Yeah.
Emily
She played Irina.
Okay.
Yeah. And Chris was, wait, why am I blanking on Chris's last name? Was my husband.
Enright?
Yeah, Chris Enright was my husband. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So those are the memories, those are my biggest memories of you at William and Mary. What do you remember most?
Well, the biggest part I played was Emily in Our Town.
Yes, of course.
So that was my junior year. And that was amazing. That was Jerry Bledsoe's production. And it's that was sort of my big main stage lead there. And and then later on, I went on to tell a mock story about that.
I
The great
heard that. Yes. And I assume it was Nadia who was dating Alec Baldwin then at the time.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, wow.
That's a different mock story. I've told two, so I've told three. But yeah, I told one about just moving to New York with Nadia, and then I told another one later about our town and my son's cancer.
Eating the Day. Yes, I was
Yeah,
listening to
right.
it. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh.
so Liam and Mary came through for me in my mock years later on.
So I know you came to New York, as you said, in the mall story. You came with Nadia and another girl who I couldn't piece, who then ran off later with a rich guy. I was like, who was that?
Yeah, she was somebody that I had met at the Georgia Shakespeare Festival.
Okay.
Because after, like, during the summers, I don't know, did you ever do the Virginia Shakespeare Festival?
Twice.
Yeah, I know. So I did it, I think I did it twice. And then I went off to SETC, like my junior year, and got cast at the Georgia Shakespeare Festival, where I literally worked for $50 a week, you know, and then I think the second year I got bumped up to $100 a week. So it was great. But the woman that moved with me to New York was another actress that I'd met down there.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, literally, I think she lasted a month. She was like, this is not for me. So.
Because I don't remember your Hell's Kitchen years, but I remember the Brooklyn years, because I think when I got out of college and was working in DC, I came up and you were with Bill. Did you?
Yeah,
because I stayed with you guys one or two nights one time. Yeah.
Chipper and I, Bill came up for graduate school. So he was getting his PhD in English. And I did not last that long as an actress. I did a couple of small productions. I did a production of As You Like It, where I played Celia. So I, you know, was a different part. I graduated up from the Forester. And then I just realized that I was more of a writer. And so by the time I was living with Bill, I think I was working at a literary agency, and I was starting to write my very first novel, which is, thank God, still in a drawer somewhere. So Bill and I lived in Williamsburg, like in 1989, 90, before there were a bunch of hipsters there. It was like Polish people and crack prostitutes. That was
I remember, like, next door or across the street from a firehouse is all I remember about the place.
Oh yeah, that was Bill's first place. Yeah, he lived right next door to a firehouse. And people didn't come to Brooklyn then. It was real sketchy, you know. It's like deserted streets, and it was just like, you know, it was during the crack days. So it was like you know, you were a little bit, people wanted to be inside after dark because you'd just get chased down the street. It wasn't even,
right.
You know, right, exactly.
Do you remember I mean, you spoke about in the moth stories, and I want to talk about the moth because that's a fantastic thing that, quite frankly, I didn't really know much about until doing the research for this. But the transition from telling someone else's story to writing the story yourself, and just that realization, saying, you know, because I remember your intensity in college. You were very serious and intense about things, and how that shifted over to the discipline to put it on paper, because it is discipline. It is.
Yeah,
I think it's harder than being anything in acting and studying acting. That's the discipline, is writing it out.
Right. Well, it's funny. It's like I loved acting, and I feel like having gone through a theater program really set me up to be a better writer, because, you know, I think very orally now. Like when I write something, I read it out loud. And now that I've transitioned into writing for television, which I know we'll probably talk about later, it's like that theater training really has come through, because I used to have to act those lines. So I don't junk it up too much, like when I'm writing for TV. But even when I was acting, like, I don't know if you remember, but certainly at the Georgia Shakespeare Festival, as soon as I was off stage, I was just like reading a book, always. I always had like 5 books going. Mm-hmm. So I think clearly my heart lay in writing. I had written more in high school, and then the acting was a little bit more of a detour for me. Yeah, I don't really know how I made that transition, except I had a temporary job working in publishing. And I just remember somebody going through the office one day, and one of the editors in my publishing house had just gotten a book contract. And they said that she'd gotten $100,000 advance. And I was like, ooh, what is this thing called an advance? It's like, I would like to have this thing called
I would like to have this
advance.
To be a writer. Like, it was really that much thought. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write a novel. And so every day I would just like sit down. I took myself to, I saved up the money that I'd made, and I went to Greece and Turkey for 4 months. Lara Carson and I went, and we toured Greece for 4 months. And that's where I I wrote the majority of my first novel and when I was 25, that thank God is still in a drawer because it was a disaster. Yeah.
So is that going to be, is that going to come out someday as the new To Set a Watchman? The first one that never...
let us hope not. I probably should burn it, but no, I mean, it was very heartfelt. It was about a million different things, and I was just figuring it out. And then, I was working for a literary agent at that time, and I gave it to her, and I'm like, and she's like, let me read it. So I gave it to her on a Friday. She came back on a Monday, and she just held it out to me, and she was like, no. And I was devastated. And then, but I realized after a little while she was right. It was a mess. And I sat down, I put that one aside, and I sat down and started my second novel, which is my first published novel.
Yes.
And I would literally get up at 4:00 in the morning to write, and then go work a full work day and read other people's manuscripts, at night. And, just slowly got enough pages. And that one she really liked. And that was the one we sold to Grove Atlantic, and it was translated into 13 languages. And that was like, okay, now I can say I'm a writer. But I never short stories or anything. I just decided it's like, I want to write a novel. So that's where I started.
Well, you're obviously, you have to, master storyteller is the only way to put it, since you've done it, at the Moth, on TV, in novels. Your 4 books, The Stolen Tongue, The Dressed Lodger, The Mammoth Cheese, and Witches on the Road Tonight. And from what I haven't read all of your work, I'm sorry, but from what I've read and from what I know about you, it seems like whenever I read something, there's in the basics 2 types. There's plot driven, where the characters are dragged along, and in the other one where the real development is the character's search and journey development, and the plot just happens to be the tool. It seems you're more that in your novels, that type of writing.
Yeah. I think my theater background actually, this is where it helped me a lot, because I naturally want to write character, but I also am really conscious of boring people. Like, the feeling if you're on stage and people aren't responding to you and you can just feel yourself losing them. It's like, I feel that way in writing. Like, you have to keep it moving. So the best writers, like Dickens, does both really well. He's like good line by line. He's good with characterization, and he has a really compelling plot. So that's like what I always try to get at, in my novels. It's like to make sure that the characters and the themes are really driving the story, but you still want to always turn the page. Because if not, I always thought, I want to write these beautiful jewel-like novels. But every time when I worked for the literary agent and I would start to read those, I would be like, I'm asleep. So it's like, you want to kind of keep it moving, I think.
I just remember one of the few things actually the only thing I remember from Lou Catron's playwriting class. The only thing I remember out of that whole class was this. He said, if there's something in your script or something in your writing, and the only reason it's there is because you like it, and it doesn't drive the character or the plot, get rid of it. If it's just because it's,
Yeah, and you really feel that in script writing. Like, novels are much more forgiving. You've got 400 pages, and sometimes you'll have a flabby sentence or whatever. But like, writing a script, especially a television script, is more like poetry. It's like you've just got to trim every little bit of fat. You have 48 to 54 pages to tell an entire beginning to end story there. And so it really is just like cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and pushing and trimming. And I think that was a gift of Dr. Catron's class as well.
Because and I think it's your novel that led you to TV, because it was writing a pilot for Witches on the Road Tonight that started your TV work. How'd that all? Are we still going to see Witches on the Road Tonight at some point?
Well, maybe NBC Universal optioned that, and then they just sat on it. So I don't know if anything's ever going to come of it. And
did you get an advance for it?
Yeah, I did.
There you go. Full circle.
Let me give everybody one piece of advice. Children, don't write for free. There was, it came along at a really weird time, because I'd finished Mammoth Cheese, and then I had my daughter while I was writing that. And then right when Mammoth Cheese came out, I had twin boys. And and then one of my boys was very sick, and I basically stopped writing for 5 years, and for 4.5 years, I couldn't juggle 3 children and cancer and everything else. So I just put all writing aside. And I had just started the idea of Which Is on the Road Tonight right before the boys were born. And then when I came back to it 4 years later, like everything about my life had changed, everything about my worldview had changed, and the entire landscape of publishing had changed, because the internet had sort of like really taken off during that time, and people just aren't buying books in the way they used to. And more things were moving towards television. So like I wrote that novel, you know, it got great reviews. It sold, you know, a handful. I mean, it sold well, but it didn't sell not the kind of money you can live on like some of my other books had. And so I was just looking at my life. I was now like, I had 3 children that I had to raise and put through college, and people are not buying books anymore in the way that they used to. And I was like, television has gotten so much better. So I decided we sold our house. I used the money that I had from the house sale to like basically take a year to just teach myself how to write television. And I already had a book that I'd written that I didn't quite feel done with. It's like, I still want to do something with these characters. So I used that novel to write a pilot. And the way I taught myself to do it is I sat down in front of the pilot of 6 Feet Under, which is just, you know, such an amazing show. And I was like, I want my show to be kind of in the vein of that show. And so I sat with my iPhone, you know, and I had the stopwatch on, and every time there'd be a scene change, I'd stop the stopwatch and I would write down like how long every scene was and just like one brief sentence about what it was about. And I realized that in a television pilot, usually in a script, you're not aware of it, but there's like a beat change every minute to a minute and a half. Like those scenes are super short, which, coming from being a novelist, I just had to teach myself the rhythm of TV writing. And so I probably wrote like 5 or 6 drafts of a pilot before I showed it to my TV agents that I got from my literary agent. And they were able to use it. I mean, we optioned it with NBC Universal, but it got me my first job on this really out there TV show called Emerald City. And literally because they'd really liked my pilot, they wanted to get me into a writer's room. I got the call on a Wednesday with the job offer, and I was going to have to start working the following Monday, which meant I was going to have to relocate to Los Angeles, find a place to live, find a car, figure out what to do with my children. But I said, yes, I'll do it. I mean, you have to take that opportunity. It was my first TV job, you know, and so I was able. But that was the script that got me that job. And actually that script has gotten me pretty much every job ever since, because I haven't written another pilot, though I'm working on one right now. Wow. You know, I've just been able, luckily, to parlay it into job after job. So I don't know.
When you were teaching yourself how to write TV, I'm sure Craig feels the same way I do. When you're trying to learn lines, especially for the audition, you either memorize it right away because it flows and it clicks, or there's some scenes you go, I can't get off the page because this is just crap. I'm like, it's just, I can't remember.
And it's obvious there've been multiple drafts, and there's vestiges of earlier like, incarnations, you know, and there's no flow to it. Yeah.
What is happening here? Yeah.
Like, exactly. Well, I can't. It's impossible. But when you get a script where they hand you like a paragraph, and you're like, you're memorizing in 2 seconds because you're like, okay, it just flows. It makes perfect sense.
And it's specificity. Like I teach sometimes at NYU, and they've asked me to teach script writing there. And one of the things I always say to my students is it's like specific, because that's what's going to stick in an actor's mind. That's what's going to create character that's coming to life on the page. And if you have generic language, or you have mushy language or something like that, or you can't really see it, then people are not going to be able to remember it. And, you know, I invited, I'm friends with the actress Carrie Preston. I don't know if either of you guys have ever worked with her. And Michael
Anderson. I've never worked with her. I love her work, though, on Good Wife.
We met at the Good Wife. Yeah, we met each other at the Georgia Shakespeare Festival when we were like 18 and 19 years old, and stayed friends ever since. But I invited them to speak to my class, and that was exactly the thing that they said. It's like she created that character of Elspeth on the Good Wife because the writing was so specific. And it's like, it's just, I don't know. It's hard. I mean, it's like pornography. You know it when you see it, right? It's like it's good writing or bad writing.
Well, I think
But I
writers
think
that
being
have,
able to memorize it is like, wait,
yeah,
say it, broke up.
That's okay. Craig?
I think writers that have been performers are able to write even small parts with empathy. They have empathy for every character that they're writing, and it, you know, Kurt, going out for a 2 or 3 line part, sometimes you can tell when
Yeah.
somebody
Right.
has thought about this waiter who has 2 lines and thought about them as a 3-dimensional human being, and
Right.
that makes a big difference.
It does. It does.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then look at something like Breaking Bad, right? Where the character of Jesse was going to be written off after the pilot. But
Right.
because that actor came in and did something really great with those really interesting lines, they wrote to the character. So that's what I'm always telling my students. It's like, even the smallest part, write them so specifically, because that character you might want to use that character and bring them back in episode 4 or season 2,
Right.
but if they're forgettable and they're like, wife of the week #1, it's like, who cares? So, yeah.
So you spent a long time next on Longmire, which is another one of those character driven, yes, it's a crime drama out west in politics, but it's really about, the journey of the characters.
That's very, very character driven show. And that was really my first big break, because they brought me out just to write a one-off. Like, it was right when Longmire was moving from A&E and they got picked up by Netflix. So they were going to be able to have longer episodes and do more and go a little bit darker. And they liked the script that I wrote based on Witches on the Road Tonight. I called it The Crooked Road. They'd really liked that pilot script. And so they hired me to write just like a one-off, like I can't remember what they're even called, but it's like, no, this is where the COVID brain comes in. It's like, ever since I got sick, it makes me like, it's like, what are my children's names? Like, I can't remember anything. But anyway, they hired me to write one script, and then they really liked it. So then they brought me back to write a second script in season 4. And then they hired me freelance. That's the word I was looking for. They wanted me to be a freelance writer. So I wrote 2 freelance scripts for them. And then they brought me back the next year as a staff writer, and they brought me back the 3rd year as a story editor. And I just learned so much by being the writer. And they had a very different way of working. Like, most writers' rooms are a whole bunch of writers around a table and everybody's throwing ideas. The way they worked is the 2 executive producers, this wonderful woman, Greer Shepard, and her partner, Hunt Baldwin, would bring, and John Coveney also, would, the creators and executive producers would just bring in one writer at a time. And then we would break the story together out in Los Angeles or Santa Fe, if that's where we were filming. And then I would get to go back to New York and write it. So I didn't have to be away from my kids as long.
Okay.
Like, when I did Emerald City, I was away from my children for 5 months. It was awful. Like, I would fly back every couple of weeks, but so with Longmire, I could go for 2 weeks at a time, and then I would be able to write in New York. And Curtis Boo Killebrew, who wrote for Mrs. America,
Okay.
also wrote for Longmire.
Okay.
I think he wrote the episode before yours.
All right.
Yeah. So I saw it, was like, oh my God, Boo. Yeah. So she wrote for the show that you're in.
Yeah,
she was a Longmire alum. Well, yeah. And then I got after Longmire, I got hired to do this show Barkskins, which is debuting Monday, I think.
Monday, yeah, on Stars.
Which is based on Annie Proulx's novel, and yeah, 25th, yeah, on National Geographic. So, and that was, again, a very different writing experience, because that was one in which the showrunner, he had been a novelist, and he had a really specific vision for that show. And so we were basically brought in to kind of help break the story and to write little scenes. There's something called gangbanging a script, which is where you like 4 or 5 different writers will each take a section, and I think that's not socially acceptable anymore, so they're looking for another word for it.
As long as it's consensual, consensual. I mean,
Exactly. It's consensual, exactly. We're all getting paid. And so we would all write little sections of scripts, but ultimately it was Elwood's vision, and Elwood would rewrite it.
right.
In a way, that was a little bit more unusual for me. And then on the one that I'm working, that we just finished, that'll be coming out in the fall, Filthy Rich, that showrunner was completely different again. He was super collaborative, and he was so warm and welcoming with everybody's ideas. This is Abe Sylvia, who wrote for Nurse Jackie, and he
Okay.
wrote Dead to Me, and he's the showrunner on Filthy Rich, like one of the most brilliant writers I've ever worked with in my life. And so he had a very different way of doing things. So every show that I've worked on has had a slightly different way of how
Right.
scripts get written.
But you're a producer
And you have to be
listed.
so, another thing I tell my, yeah, I got,
So are you on set more than as opposed to just in a writer's room being one of the producers?
yeah. So the way I started getting out on set for Longmire, and that was kind of terrifying because on that show, they'd all been working together for 3 years before I even came along. So I always felt a little bit like it was the first time I'd been on set. I didn't really know what I was doing. I would
Right.
sometimes say stuff that I shouldn't have said, you know, like because I just was feeling my way around. And then Barkskins, we've already done writing, even though I was brought on as a producer. And that's, producer also is just a level in the Writers Guild that it's like part of your pay structure.
Okay.
So that one, I had a little bit more responsibility, but they were filming in Quebec City. And by that point, the writer's room had ended and I'd already got the job on Filthy Rich.
Okay.
So then I was in the writer's room, thank God, New York. And then for that one, I got sent down to New Orleans to cover my episodes. And that was super fun. So
So that's coming out in the fall, and that's what, in New
Heart.
Orleans?
Yeah, that was filmed in New Orleans. That's the one that stars Kim Cattrall,
Right.
and it was filmed in New Orleans. And we were supposed to debut in May, but then with the pandemic, they had to shut down all their productions, so they had no original programming for the fall. So they actually pushed us to the fall. So you know, it's good. We're going to get
you're going to get a full fall tryout, yeah. Instead of
I
mid-season
watched the
replacement.
trailer this
Exactly.
morning.
So-
Watched the trailer. It looks like good trashy fun.
It does. We need that. We need
Yeah.
good trash.
And you know what? It's changed a lot from that pilot episode that they filmed. You know, it really grew and took on. I personally love it. It's like I don't know what people are going to think. We pushed a lot of envelopes with that show, and Fox I think was a little bit nervous about some of the stuff we were doing, but I felt, again, Abe had a vision. We all worked together so collaboratively. I think it's smart, it's funny, it's irreverent. Like, I think that show could be a hit, but I have no idea. Either that or people will hate it. But, you know, we didn't do anything safe with it. Let's put it that way.
So
I'll be excited for you guys to see it. And the cast was extraordinary.
I'm just curious how it works now that, you know, they're in production. They've ordered, I guess, what they've done, a 10-episode order, and now you wait and see what happens, or you know.
Yeah.
Or has it all been shot? Is it all in the can?
No, we wait till we get to season 2. Like,
Oh, wow.
we did, right? Yeah, it's all in the can. In fact, we had just finished, and Abe was so wonderful because he knows I want to eventually have my own show.
Mhm.
So he let me sit in the editing process. Like, he just let me shadow him in some ways because I had written I wrote 2 episodes of Filthy Rich, and then he asked me to co-write the finale. So I felt like I had a big part in the voice of that show. And so then for him to let me sit in on the editing, and one of the things that they always say is for a TV episode, you write it 3 times, right? You write it on the page, and then you write it when it's being filmed, and then you write it in editing.
The editing, right.
Because you really don't know what you're going to get. You know, sometimes you think that an actor will give you something completely different than you thought a scene was supposed to be. Sometimes that's great, sometimes it's not so great. And then you have to edit around it. Or they, for whatever reason, didn't get coverage, and so you have to edit, or a line dropped out, or somebody was so brilliant that you want to spotlight something that you hadn't planned for. So the people that are editors on that show were extraordinary. I mean, they'd worked on The Americans, which is like one of my favorite shows ever, and lots of other really big, wonderful productions. And so I got to sit in and watch that, and we had just finished. They were doing like the last sound mix when everything got shut down. So I think that's one of the reasons that Fox moved us forward, because we were done, you know, and just like right in the nick of time. They had to do a few things from home, but that's probably also why we all got sick, because like I think
crammed into a room.
Well, yeah, I think I probably caught it the last week I was on the subway. because I came down with it, like I got hit March 23rd. So that was like a week after we all stopped working. So more than likely that was the last bit.
Well, we're as always, I know we're running long, but I want to ask you about the Moth Theater. I just found that looking at your piece and looking at some of those, and I watched and went, I have to find this. I have to do this.
You would
This
love it. You would love it. We just turned 20 years old, I think, like last year. But my very good friend George Green, who is a novelist, had this idea for it, and he just asked, and this is like 1997, and he's like, would you help me start this thing, the storytelling thing? And he asked a couple of friends, and we all just kind of pitched in. Nancy Gunn was part of it too. She was like one of the first artistic directors, and we were just a bunch of kids in New York and figuring it out. And we started off in small bar. First it was George's living room, then we moved to bars all around the Lower East Side. And then it just started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then now it's in like every city in America. It's all over the world. We have a radio show, we have books, we have a podcast. And it's just, you know, I told the story years ago about my Southern aunts. And then I told one about just moving to New York. And then I told one in the cemetery that starts with my thing on our town. And that, and hopefully this is, I'm not going to jinx it, but that, Bobby and Kristen Lopez, who wrote Frozen and Avenue Q and Book of Mormon, heard that Moth story and have optioned it for a Broadway musical. So I know.
The Eat the Day story or the
Day? Yeah. So we're still, it's like all the lawyers have been like torturing each other with all the, because you know there's.
Wow. Did you ever find out the diapers? Did you ever find out where that came from?
Never did.
No? Okay.
And you know, I always wanted to put cameras out, and I was like, let it go.
That's it's funny. I recently read Anna Quinlan's book called Alternate Side, which she wrote about. She wrote about the street on 71st Street because I used to live down the street from her, and I got to meet her, and the whole thing was based on that street. And one of the plot lines in that one is someone who leaves dog poo on someone's doorstep. So I jumped to that immedianely with the whole diapers on the doorstep.
It was so, I mean, I was so sleep deprived during that period. It's like, but it was, I don't know. Again, you get a great story out of it. So
it's amazing. So as we're wrapping things up with master storyteller Sheri Holman, so you've got Filthy Rich in the fall. You're working on your own pilot again for your own show. What's other than getting everyone in your family healthy and moving forward? What's anything else we should know about coming up? I mean, we have the Barskins next week and Filthy Rich in the fall.
Barskins next week, Filthy Rich. I can't talk about something that I may start writing on this summer. Once it's officially announced, I will post it because and Curtis, well, both of you guys, I'm gonna have to talk to you because the pilot that I'm working on that hopefully we'll be taking out soon is set in Phoenix City, Alabama. And it used to be called the wickedest city in America. So it's from 1946 to 1954.
Are you saying you need a creepy old man, a creepy old Southern man? Are you saying that?
Southern mobsters.
Oh,
you nailed our wheelhouse.
We're going to get it all set up. I tell you, that's exactly it. This is why all
Sugar Belle, if you need someone there who might be on the other side of the law, you let me know.
Well, don't get ahead of yourself, my friend. I also am capable of playing that accent.
Yes, but I can do creepy better than you. You know that.
Yeah, I'll be a slightly less creepy side.
Right. Oh, there's mobsters to go around. Believe me.
Excellent. Oh, Sheri, it's been fantastic catching up. So glad you're doing well.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. And thanks for doing that. What a fun thing. I watched Jen teach the other day and I was like, oh.
We're having a good time. As we've been asking.
I don't think you and I crossed. Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think I graduated. Did you cross
paths with Sheri?
We overlapped 1 year. So I was a freshman when you were doing Three Sisters and anything. Were you in Anything Goes? Yes. So yeah, we didn't do anything together.
Yeah,
but
I was in an old baby. I had like birdseed boobs. So yeah.
Oh my God, that's right.
It's all coming back to me. Yes.
I played somebody's mother. I don't even remember who it was.
Oh, the young ingenue's mother, maybe the old.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe Melanie.
Maybe yes, Melanie's.
Yeah,
mom.
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember.
Oh, Hope Harcourt. Yes.
Right,
Mrs.
exactly.
Harcourt.
Yeah, it was her mom.
So
that was my last role at Wistenary. Thank you very much. Exactly.
Go ahead.
As we wrap up, we've been asking everybody one last question. If heaven exists, what do you want Trish West to say to you at the pearly gates?
Oh my God. What do I want her to say to me? Well, I'll tell you the kindest thing she ever did for me. When I played Emily in Our Town, I used to have this, and I still do, I had this like complete phobia about anything around my wrists.
Okay.
And she had originally designed a wedding dress that I have to spend an entire act in a wedding dress. And she designed 3/4 length sleeves so that I would not feel suffocated. So I know I would say her, God bless you, Trish. I will never, ever forget it.
Oh, guys, it has been great. Sheri, so glad you're doing well. Stay well, everybody.
Thank you.
And
And love
everybody,
to everybody.
stay
I'll
safe,
talk to you
everyone.
later.
Thanks.